There have been some questions that have come in, and David, I'm going to ask the first one of you since your name is on here. Out of all agriculture BMPs, which have the most potential to produce cost-effective credits?
Well, I'm not going to necessarily, that part would not necessarily be my expertise, to tell you the truth, because I think that the farmers know much more as far as the the cost and other things about the nutrients. But I will say that cover crops, as far as farmers would not do it without the money, is really important. We've looked at a lot of different practices and what we call additionality, which is if you look at a bunch of people that didn't get funded and you kind of try to match them as a control group, and you look at people who did get funded, there are certain statistical techniques that we use to do that additionality estimate. We have a number of papers on that. Is that cover crops are one of those that farmers, that the farmers are 10 times more likely to do it with the money than without. That's how, I mean, I could give you more details, but that's probably the easiest one I could say. And that's why Maryland's program, most of the money goes towards cover crops.
Thank you. The next question, suppose a farmer dedicates a parcel of land to generate credits for sale. What happens if some years down the road the farmer wants to put that land back into production? Is there a way to rescind the credit?
Right, that's a great question. So Maryland is working on new policies, I believe, for the annual credits, right? Am I correct about that? No, okay. I'm not getting a nod from Susan. But anyway, the way water quality trading credits work is they're good for a year. And unless there's something that the state would additionally require, you can always just opt out. So you've made your sale, you sign a 3-year agreement, or even just a 1-year agreement. Or maybe there's a minimum number of years that the state requires. But the bottom line is you're not obligating yourself to forever do this. Now, if the state set up the program where there were certain credits that were based on retiring such land and having a permanent easement, that's a different issue. You would have known that clearly when you entered it. But the short answer is no, you're not obligated to forever produce those credits.
Okay, thank you. Farmers have historically been reluctant to reveal details of their nutrient management plans. Given the reluctance, how can you assure transparency?
No, that's not me.
Well, the dog. It's a voluntary program, and so you're going to enter water quality trading knowing, you should know at least, read the fine print, what those conditions are. And my understanding, my greater understanding of that question, which is a valid question, is that that's not monolithic, and that there are some farmers who actively are out there, as today, sharing what they do and advocating. So I think you're going to have some that opt out, and you're going to have some that opt in, and I think the market players will decide for themselves. But the transparency needs to be there for both the public and the regulatory agencies, and that will bear itself out.
Okay,
it's a valid question. I'm not dismissing it, but.
Thank you. And by the way, I've kind of put some of these in too, so when we have the group, all of the panel presenters up front, those that might want to take a bite at that apple again will have the apple available. David, your map showed the Western Shore, Eastern Shore, and Susquehanna basins combined into one trading basin. How does this prevent pollution hotspots? The more urban areas are going to buy from the rural areas, so the Western Shore is going to become a pollution hotspot from trade. So why are we not retaining trades on the actual basin level, or restricting trades on the actual basin level?
Well, again, I wasn't part of the committee that decided that, so I'm not, I know that one of the things that, between the Potomac and the Eastern Shore and so on, so that they were much farther away. The Susquehanna is, I think one of the issues, put it this way, Susquehanna is enormous. We should really allow the Susquehanna and Maryland to be trading in the part with Pennsylvania. But if you just allow Susquehanna alone to be trading, if you have such a small area, you're going to generate very little activity. So I'm sure there's some kind of balance between the size of the basin versus the market activity. And in fact, another way they could have dealt with it is they could allow it even Potomac to Eastern Shore, but have trading ratios as you go across basin. Maybe the trading ratio would be 5-to-1 or whatever, because ultimately if you're concerned about the bay, you could allow trading across broader areas, but allow trading ratios kind of make up for that. So you might sacrifice some local, pollution for the trade. That said, there's still, the TMDLs go down to very small sub-watersheds. So no matter what you're doing with the trading program, the combination of trading and all the other cost share and other kind of regulatory things that you're going on are still going to be met given those kind of standards.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and it's the central question out there. And I agree with everything Dave said. So there's three moving parts here. One is the Bay TMDL science. And we heard from Rich, there's room for such trades. Second is if there's locally an impaired dirty water being affected locally by nitrogen phosphorus sediment, we've said clearly you've got to constrain the trading. And then thirdly, there's just the misunderstanding, if you allow me to say, that the presence of nitrogen phosphorus in a free-flowing stream necessarily is a hot spot. So we need to be careful in equating the presence of nitrogen phosphorus sediment as a hot spot and be leery and be cognizant of the fact that that may not be an issue locally, and therefore there's no science basis to constrain it. But where it needs to be constrained, we expect it to be constrained.
Okay. And which sector gets the credit if a non-ag sector purchases nitrogen credits from a farmer, but the farmer is responsible for maintaining the best management practice?
Do you
Once you do this one,
who gets the credit? I want to say the buyer gets the credit. I don't feel that was the question, however. The buyer's a non-point source? Was
the
that?
buyer's a point source, I think. The buyer's a regulated source.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the regulated source gets the credit,
Yeah.
not the ag side.
Oh, the whip goals. I can't. It's so light up here and dark out there. I can't see who said that. Yeah, that was this baseline issue with the waving hand. So the watershed implementation goals are maintained by the fact that the seller both met their baseline and went further down, so as to account for what they needed. So the watershed goals I'm not concerned about. I think it was more like, do I get to keep it? I think that was the question.
Yes.
And if you're selling your credits, you've sold those credits. If you elect to contractually no longer do that, then you can contractually back out of that, unless you signed a forever deal. I hope I answered the question.
Okay, and one more, and then we'll assemble for lunch, but I'm keeping these other questions that I know other panel members, in addition to the two gentlemen up front, will be able to expand upon. One of the major sources of skepticism has to do with cost. Frankly, most environmental groups don't believe the high cost estimates associated with TMDL compliance, particularly if trading is not allowed. Who can provide credible, unbiased estimates of these costs?
I mean, one of the sources, if you want to know where people are getting it, if you look at the WIPs, one of the things is King and Hagen. It's Dennis King, who's at the University of Maryland Center for, or CES, Solomon's Island. And they try to do given the best available information from lots of different projects, use a lot of estimates of which counties, if they didn't, some counties like Baltimore County is very sophisticated, would be able to have the kind of data on their own. But if you're a county that didn't have maybe your own cost estimates, you would oftentimes use the King and Hagen with some adjustments by region. But those are at least as one source that the WIPs are actually citing. It's one of the most common ones. Now, there's a lot of other things, but I think that's a place to go, particularly for stormwater, which is the one that probably is the highest cost. And I think that Maryland alone, I mean, I look nationally. So I study stormwater issues nationally and look at literature from all sorts of places, Cincinnati and Oregon and so on and so. And stormwater is more like permeable pavement and other kind of things, is quite expensive compared to cover crop or conservation tillage, those kind of practices. I look at both sectors, and I can say whether the magnitudes are not 100 to 1 or 50 to 1, they're at least 10 to 1, or at least in the ballpark of considerably higher, such that trading, could potentially be cost effective in some way or another.
Okay. And just one more, I'll just squeak in here. Will farmers be allowed to sell credits that are the result of a cost-shared BMP? For example, EQIP, cover crops, etc. Cost-share program, funded by cost-share
No,
programs.
I think that, I mean, cost share can help you get to the baseline, but you can't double count. You can't get money from, like a federal program like EQIP and then also sell those credits. But there are a lot of practices that are funded, so to get to the baseline, cost sharing can be important. Farmers may be doing some of their own, they may be getting cost share, but they can't double count. That's definitely a common.
I don't disagree with at least the philosophical approach expressed, but because it's not a science or legal question, we're silent on that. It's going to be up to the state of Maryland to decide.
Okay. Well, thank you both.